accountant specializing in construction industry, I always have construction owners ask me what cost codes they should use. So I thought it could be helpful to create a video on what I usually advise them. Spoiler alert, it's not a cookie cutter list, it depends on a lot of factors. Cost codes are one of those things that sound straightforward until you actually try to set them up. And the mistakes people make here don't just create a little extra admin work, they create months of bad data, reports that don't mean anything, and job costing that takes so long to maintain that most contractors eventually give up on it altogether. So today I want to walk you through how cost codes actually work inside QuickBooks, how they interact with project management software you're probably already using, and the setup decisions that will either make your job costing really usable or turn it into a nightmare. So before we get into the specifics, I want to make sure we're all starting from the same place. When I say cost codes, I'm talking about the categories you use to track where money is going on a specific job. Materials, labor, subcontractors, equipment, permits, each one is a cost code. And when they're set up properly, they let you see exactly what each project costs to complete and where your estimate was off. When you're set up poorly, they create mess that takes longer to maintain than the job costing is worth. So let's talk about how to get it right. Inside QuickBooks Online, cost codes live in your products and services list. And the most important thing to understand about this is that every single product and service in that list needs to be mapped to the correct account in your chart of accounts. This is where a lot of people get tripped up. They set up a bunch of cost codes, they start coding receipts and invoices to them, and then they look at their profit and loss and nothing makes sense. Usually because the mapping between the products and services list and the chart of accounts was never set up correctly in the first place. So when you're building your cost code structure in QuickBooks Online, there are two things happening at the same time. You're creating the categories you'll use to track job costs at the project level, and you're making sure those categories feed into the right accounts on your financial statements. Both sides have to be set up correctly or data flowing through them isn't going to be useful. This is also why the chart of accounts needs to be built thoughtfully before you start using those cost codes. If the chart of accounts is a mess, the cost codes mapping into it will be a mess too. You can't build clean job costing on top of a disorganized financial structure. Now, if you're using a project management platform that syncs with QuickBooks, which a lot of construction businesses are, the cost code conversation gets a little more involved. Let me use JobTread as an example because it's one I work with a lot. JobTread actually has 3 levels of cost categorization: cost types, cost items, and then a 3rd level of detail underneath that. And that layered structure gives you a lot of flexibility in how you track cost at the project level. The opportunity here is real. More detail means more visibility into exactly what's happening on a job. You can see labor broken down by phase, materials by category, subcontractor cost by trade, but that opportunity comes with a responsibility because every one of those cost levels in JobTread still needs to map correctly to your chart of accounts in QuickBooks when the sync runs. If you set up detailed cost items in JobTread without thinking about how they're going to land in QuickBooks, you'll end up with transactions sitting in the wrong account, reports that don't reflect reality, and reconciliation process that takes way longer than it should. The sync between the two systems is only as clean as the mapping behind it. So before you ever turn on the integration, make sure you understand exactly what's flowing where. Buildertrend works similarly. You have the ability to track costs at a detailed level within the platform, and that detail can flow into QuickBooks. Same principle applies. The structure in Buildertrend and the structure in QuickBooks need to be aligned before a single transaction moves between them. This is something I want to be really direct about because I see people get burned by it regularly. Not all project management software integrates with QuickBooks in a way that supports real job costing. Jobber is a great example. It's an easy platform to use and it does a lot of things well for service-based contractors, but the QuickBooks integration for job costing is very limited. The level of detail you'd need to track project profitability accurately just doesn't flow through cleanly. JobNimbus is similar. Good software for what it does, but if job costing is a priority for your business, the connection between JobNimbus and QuickBooks isn't going to give you what you need. And this is an important thing to sit with if you're currently using one of these platforms. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to switch software, but it does mean you need to make a smart decision about where your job costing actually lives. Maybe you use one platform for estimating and client communication, and you track your actual job costs separately in a way that works better for your financial reporting. The mistake is assuming that because two systems are connected, the job costing data is flowing accurately. Sometimes it's not, and you won't know until you look closely at what's actually landing in QuickBooks. So this one I want to spend some time on because I see it constantly and it creates problems that take a long time to clean up. There are standardized construction cost code lists out there. The Construction Specifications Institute has one, various industry bodies publish them, and they're comprehensive, hundreds of codes covering every conceivable category of construction work. And a lot of contractors see these lists and think, great, I'll just import this into my software and I'll be set. Please don't do it. And let me explain why. When you import a standard list, you're bringing in hundreds of cost codes that you will never use. And every time you're trying to code a receipt or invoice, you're scrolling through a massive list trying to find the 5 or 10 categories that are actually relevant to your work. It makes the day-to-day job costing so time-consuming that people stop doing it consistently. And inconsistent job costing is almost worse than no job costing at all, because you end up with partial data that gives you a full sense of what your projects actually cost. What I recommend instead is going through the cost code list, looking at the categories that are genuinely relevant to the type of work that you do, and only bringing those into your software. You don't need someone to tell you exactly which codes to use. You know your business. You know what your job costs and what categories fall into it. Look through the standard list as a starting point, pick what actually applies, and build a lean structure around that. For most smaller contractors, you really only need materials, labor, subcontractors, equipment, and a handful of trade-specific categories. That's it. A focused list that stays manageable is going to serve you far better than a comprehensive list that nobody maintains. So how many cost codes is too many? This question comes up a lot, and the honest answer is it depends on the size of your team and how receipts are actually being processed. If you have a dedicated team member whose job is to code every receipt in detail, a more granular cost code structure can work. You get more visibility, more detail in your job costing reports, and a clearer picture of exactly where costs are landing on each project. But for most small to mid-sized contractors, that level of detail creates more work than it generates insight. Every receipt has to be broken down. Every invoice has to be allocated across multiple codes. And when that process is sitting on the owner's plate or on bookkeepers who's already stretched, the detail doesn't get maintained consistently and the job costing falls apart. A simple, well-maintained cost code structure will always outperform a complex one that nobody keeps up with. The best system is the one that actually gets used. So when you're deciding how granular to go, ask yourself honestly, who is going to be coding these receipts? How much time do they have? And is the additional detail going to produce information you'll actually use to make better decisions? If the answer to that last question is yes, and you have the capacity to maintain it, go deeper. If honest answer is probably not, keep it simple. Cost codes are one of those things that feel like a setup detail, but actually determine whether your job costing ever gives you useful information. Get the structure right before transactions start flowing. Map everything to correct chart of accounts, be deliberate about which platform your job costing actually lives in, and keep your cost code list lean enough that people will actually use it consistently. If you're setting up QuickBooks for your construction business and you want to make sure that the job costing is built correctly, that's exactly what we help with at Beyond Book Solutions. The link is in the description to book a call and we'll take a look at what your current setup needs. Until then, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.